This is Momxiety with Sav Social, and I'm your host, Samantha. Let's get right into it before the baby wakes up. So, just to give you a little background, this is my second time filming today. The first time I filmed was very chaotic, to say the least. The baby was in the footage, which I didn't mind, but every little noise was picked up from the audio, so we're going to restart, and hopefully we can get through this one. So I hope everybody had a really good Memorial Day weekend. I know we did. We had a lot of barbecue. We went to the parade. There was a lot of baby pools. It was a lot. A lot of fun though. We spent a lot of time with family and friends, so I am very excited that we were able to do that. So on last week's episode, I spoke a lot on how I prepared for birth and what what exactly happened during my delivery. And I'm really excited for today's episode because I want to talk a little bit more about postpartum and what I went through specifically. And if you guys have any stories that you would like to share, I would love to eventually share other people's stories. So I know for me, before I delivered the baby, my husband and I spoke about exactly what his role was while I was going to be delivering. So I made it very clear to him that I wanted him nowhere near the doctor's end of the bed. I wanted him to be behind me. I didn't want him to see anything because I would never want my husband to see that. This was my first response to this. I did not want him to be anywhere near the end of the bed. And he agreed as well. But fast forward to when I started to start pushing, I remember there was, I would say, one nurse by my side, and there was a doctor at the end of the bed, but it wasn't my doctor. It was a doctor from the hospital. And she had told me she's going to start the delivery, and then my doctor was going to come in and finish it. So I remember I had my husband on my left side. I started to push, and the nurse literally told him, grab her leg. And it was as if he was completely involved in this process, and I was mortified that he was going to be helping deliver this baby. Not that he was going to catch the baby, but he was still in the area that I didn't want him to be. But after 16 minutes of pushing, when the baby finally came out and the other doctor was in, they asked him to cut the umbilical cord, and it was honestly such a beautiful experience because, like I said beforehand, I wanted him nowhere near any of this. The mother has such an emotional connection to the baby, and even after the baby is born, they give you one-on-one time of just you and the baby nursing, which I'll get into that next. And it made me so happy that they included him in the entire process because although it was seemed like such a little part, I know for him it meant so much and as well for me. And I was really happy that they did that. And like I said, sometimes we think we don't want something to happen, and then once it happens, we're really grateful for it. So that's definitely something that I'm very happy they did. So another thing that they offered to us after was for the baby to get a bath. And this may not seem like a huge deal, but before we actually delivered the baby, my husband and I discussed it, and we really didn't want them to give him his first bath. Not that we thought anything would happen, but because there's a very thin layer on them of basically, let me look up the word for you. So it's called vernix caseosa. Okay, I don't know. Basically, it's a thin layer that protects the baby from the newborns. Like it protects the newborn skin from anything around them once they're born. And yeah, so I heard when they take a bath right away, it does come off, or it could. So we decided to just take the bath once he was home and recovered from his umbilical cord. Another thing they did is before I actually delivered the baby, they spoke about a vitamin K shot, eye gel that prevents an infection. And it's definitely good to have the medical knowledge beforehand. And I'm not a doctor in any way, so please, look this up on your own and speak to your doctor about it. But it's good to know information specifically about this stuff because not necessarily that it's bad or good, but it's always good to know what they're speaking about because sometimes they throw a lot of words at you that you may not completely understand. And especially in the state that you are, you may not be all there. And another thing too that they do is they give you a form to fill out. This is a little bit after the process where you just talk a little bit about how you're feeling. So, of course, you're going through a whirlwind of emotion, and this is all natural and it's expected. That's why they have this form. And I think it was really cool that, for me specifically, a nurse spoke with me and kind of went through the questions with me. And after I was reading them, I didn't realize how much of the boxes I filled until I specifically read them. And you may think something is not normal. And then when you see it on paper of what maybe is called postpartum, and you check those boxes off, it is definitely reassuring that you're not the only one going through this. And it does get better. And I will say that 9 months later, today is actually his 9 month birthday. And I am slowly feeling a lot better and getting to a place where I feel more comfortable as a mom. Um, yeah, and everybody goes through different stages, and I feel like some people it may take a year, some people it's right away where they feel like naturally they got it together, and also some people will fake it until they make it, and I guess that's one way to get through it. So definitely something to not be ashamed of and realize that every mom has their own timeline. So, another thing I remember, this is a funny little story about how after my epidural started wearing off, and the baby, was already here, I remember they had told me I cannot go to the other room, like I cannot transfer to another room where I'd be more comfortable with my family visiting until I went pee. And this seems like such a little thing, but I guess, just to monitor everything, they have to be on top of it. So I remember two nurses grabbing me and making sure that I could stand because keep in mind, like, I had probably been on an epidural for 5 hours at this point, I would say. Honestly, it went so, like, now I'm looking back, it seems like such a blur, but I had two nurses assisting me to walk to the bathroom. And I remember, just keep in mind, I get very skeeved out easily, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. I remember I walked into the bathroom, and the two nurses are telling me to sit down, and they're very adamant that I have to pee before I leave this room. And I was thinking in my head, there is no way in hell I'm sitting on this toilet at a hospital. Are you kidding? Oh my gosh. I just remember I was like, no, I'm not sitting down. And they didn't like they were just looking at me like I was crazy. I'm like, there I cannot be the only one that does not want to sit on a hospital toilet. Come on. So long story short, they ended up having to cover the toilet, but they were really like adamant that if I didn't sit, like there was going to be an issue. So I ended up going, whatever. I got back to the room and they ended up transferring me over to to a more comfortable space. And at this point, I was really trying to learn how to breastfeed. And a lot of moms plan out in advance exactly, some people have courses. I know through insurance, there's a lot of really good opportunities where you can have somebody come to your house and like teach you how to do it. But for me, I didn't really prepare anything on that. In my mind, though, I was really sure that I'd be able to. And even if it wasn't easy, really, really wanted to. I know some people plan to automatically just do formula, which, again, whatever works for you. But for me, I really wanted to try breastfeeding. So, the cool thing about our hospital is they offered a nursing specialist that would I'm sorry, lactation specialist that would constantly be coming in the room whenever I needed completely, she was on deck ready to go. And I remember she arrived at like 2 in the morning for the first time, and she was basically, if you've never had this done, she basically shows you different positions on ways to help your baby latch. And although I was so exhausted, I remember her giving me these tips. The baby was so responsive, basically took everything I was doing, and you don't know how the baby is going to be taking it. I don't know how I'm going to be reacting to it. And yeah, so it was a nice process because like I said, I had the assistant there. If I didn't, I don't really know where I would be, within that few 24 hours. I think it's really good to be educated on breastfeeding and find out what works for you and what works for the baby. So there's a fly going around my head right now, and I don't know where it's coming from. I think it's trying to sabotage this episode because it is the second time. So if it lands on my head, we will be concluding today's episode. No, just kidding. So not only was I learning how to breastfeed, but at this point, keep in mind I was in labor for 24 hours, which that sounds like a long time, but the first 10 hours I was not in pain at all. It was really the second half where I started to feel everything. And the nurses were coming in and out, checking my vitals, making sure everything was okay. Surprisingly, I was walking around the room, which I was very shocked about, but because beforehand I didn't really know what to expect. However, I will say I was shocked of how much blood I was losing. And if you are grossed out of anything, I would skip this part. But I was just really shocked because, I mean, obviously it's a wound, and I didn't know how to prepare for it. You read up on it, of course, but how much can you actually prepare? And everybody's different depending on the stitches and all of that. And one tidbit I would tell you just to be a little prepared for this is to pack yourself dermaplane, overnight pads, ice packs, which was a really big one. Witch hazel is another one that I heard is really good for healing wounds. And that's pretty much the postpartum care that I used to get through the first, I would say honestly, a month of from the delivery. I was doing this process. And one thing that was great was my nurse showed me how to do everything. I guess because I've been scrolling on Instagram, my feed was constantly telling me how to prepare for afterbirth, and I had bought everything in advance. So that's just a little thing that I would tell you to do to be prepared. And now I would like to talk about some nap time tea. So, our first topic for the nap time tea is whether you let the baby cry it out or soothe them. So, I definitely think it's different for a newborn versus a toddler. So, take that with, keep that in mind. For me, I feel like when you're sleep training, I was told that, you are supposed to let them cry it out a little bit. I'm not saying leave them for an hour, I mean like a minute or so. And that is a way for them to help self soothe them, because that's how they can make themselves go to sleep. Um, I am the person that doesn't let them cry it out. I soothe them immediately. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not really sure, but I can understand when they get older that it's good to let them kind of find their emotions. But I don't know, as a baby, I feel like they're kind of looking for that one on one time. And that's actually another thing I missed and didn't mention is once the baby is born, they give you an hour of one on one time of practicing nursing, but also, have skin on skin time. And we were told that it's actually good for their brain development. So that's something we continue to do at home. And I definitely recommend that once the baby is home with you, to do a lot of skin on skin time. And that leads back into what I was talking about for soothing them or letting them cry it out. I feel like as a newborn, they need that. They still feel your heartbeat and they're still connected to you, whether, you know, they're physically connected or just emotionally. Okay, so the second Nap time tea topic I have is sound machines. So, when the baby was born, we actually had on our registry a Hatch sound machine, and it definitely worked wonders. We no longer really use it as much, but it's definitely something good to have. And I remember even if I was in a place where we didn't have the sound machine, you could always go on YouTube and search white noise. It's definitely a good idea. Okay, so the third topic for naptime tea is screen time. So again, this is different for babies versus toddlers. And right now in my state where I'm, with a 9-month old, I currently do screen time, not phone, of course, I mean like TV. However, I try to only let him watch TV after 5 o'clock and on. And honestly, he's really not too interested. I'm not saying he doesn't look, but the majority of the time I put a show called Minnow, which is a religious show. It's basically cartoons that act out Bible stories, which is really interesting, and he really loves that the most. And a lot of the other shows that I put on for him are very slow paced. When I say that, like, look back at all the stuff I know when I was a kid I watched, and you could just see it's like night and day. The new stuff is so fast paced, and it's very chaotic. And I feel like that's why a lot of kids maybe are overstimulated and they don't even realize it because the shows are so different. They're completely made differently. And again, that might change. That's what that's the state I'm in right now. I don't know where my mind will be when he's asking for an iPad. Of course, right now I really would like him to be more of an outdoor kid, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. So, as of right now, that's where my opinion stands. Okay. And today I'm going to skip the 3x of the day. Um, Nothing really was catching my eye. And yeah, I feel like, I don't know. I just wanted to skip it today. That's all I have to say. And then some other topics that I wanted to go over for nap time tea that I was actually going to wait till next week, but I figured since I'm skipping the 3x, I was going to include them in today's, is homeschool versus daycare. And again, this is just my opinion right now. Doesn't mean that it won't change in the future. So currently, I really would like to homeschool my son. And again, this might change when he gets a little older. At this point, I'm doing a lot of freelance work, so I do have the time to be doing that because I can make my own schedule. But again, who knows where I'll be in a few years. But from someone that's gone to a public school, I don't see any issues with it. I just feel like I have the opportunity to stay home with my son, and I would like to continue that and teach him just topics that, are real life things because, when you leave college and all these things, you tend to still not have street knowledge, if that makes sense. And I feel like that's one thing I really wanted to push on my son and just to get outside and learn about nature. And again, this is just my opinion right now, and maybe it's not going to work for him, but that's what something me and my husband have discussed and hopefully can do. And again, another thing that I know a lot of people are concerned about, which again, this crosses my mind as well, is their socialization. And the more that I've become educated on it, there are so many other social activities that they could do that do not involve school. And I'm not saying don't go to school. I'm not saying it's a bad thing and maybe he will. Just as of right now, we are thinking maybe homeschool would be the route for us. So we will see in a few years. Okay, and the second thing, which is kind of what I was discussing before, was breastfeeding versus bottle feeding. And I just want to give you a little backstory about when I was breastfeeding, what happened a few days later. So basically, long story short, we went to the doctor a couple days later from delivering him, and they said that he lost a few pounds. And I was very concerned because, I didn't know that it was supposed to, it's normal that they lose a couple pounds, but I'm sorry, a couple ounces, not a couple pounds. I didn't know it was normal for that to happen. However, our doctor said, we really would like you to start supplementing because with formula because he was losing a little bit too much weight. So, with that being said, she told me to come back a few days later to see if he gained weight, and if it wasn't going to work, then I needed to go on formula. So, needed to have him on formula. Because I was so stressed about it and nervous that he didn't lose weight, I automatically put him on formula. I kept breastfeeding as well and kept pumping, but I was so concerned for him that I didn't want to risk a few days of him not getting the amount that he needed. And also, too, one thing I'd never understood about breastfeeding is you don't actually know how much they're getting. So, how do you know if you're doing the right amount, if that makes sense? Of course, with pumping, you can physically see it, but when they're directly on your breast, you don't know how much is working. Um, so at that point, I was trying mother's milk tea. I was trying body armor, which is a drink that a lot of my family recommended and said that it was one of the number one things that helped them increase their supply. So I tested all those things and it did work for a while. However, like I said, we did put him on formula right away, so I had a balance of both. One tip I would say is to definitely look into the formula that you're using because, like I said, I had such a short period where I just had to put him on right away that I didn't really have time to look into it and really look at the ingredients. And not that what he's drinking now is bad. And you might be saying, oh, well, why didn't you change the formula? Well, I tried. He totally rejected it, and it was a little upsetting to me, but I'm just saying it's good to have the knowledge about the formula that you decide to choose if you choose it. And that pretty much covers everything I wanted to go over today. I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I know I did, even though it took me 2 tries to record it. Um, I really hope that moving forward, you guys can kind of share your stories in the comments or even just message me stories or questions that you want me to go over in future episodes. Yeah, so I just want to say thank you for watching and I hope to see you next time. Bye.